Hello and welcome to the Westcity Church podcast. If you'd like to get to know us more, find us at westcitychurch.com.au. We really hope that you're encouraged by today's message.
Good morning, church. If I haven't met you, my name's Kathleen. Oops, and this is giving feedback, so that's all good? Beautiful. Welcome to Westcity this morning. There's lots of faces of people I don't know, so I'm looking forward to meeting some people at the women's lunch afterwards. But as we've said, we're going through a series at this time of year called The Cost of Living, because tomorrow is officially the end of the year. Tomorrow is the last day of this financial year, and then it clicks over and a new financial year starts on Tuesday. And a lot of us might be unaware of that because we think of our calendar year from January to December, but our economic systems have their own calendar. And this is a time of year where if you're running a business or if you have to do your paperwork and all of that stuff, this is a time to get your finances in order, to take stock of what you have and how to organise that. And because of that, we've built in a rhythm into our church year to spend all of June talking about finances and bringing them to the fore, which always feels really awkward because our finances feel like a very personal issue. It's got nothing to do with our worship, doesn't really have anything to do with anybody else. And so it feels like an awkward conversation to bring up in church. But it turns out that the Bible is deeply interested in our relationship with our stuff. And not just our relationship with our stuff, but how we get our stuff. How we relate to each other, to the land, to the animals, to the world around us as we get our stuff. And the Bible has some really harsh words in it, some words of anger and judgment, and they are nearly always aimed at those who take advantage of and exploit the vulnerable, the foreign workers, the land, the animals, and nearly all of the judgment and anger in the Bible is aimed towards the institutional systems, the economic systems that oppress and exploit others. So it turns out our relationship with our stuff is a major, major theme of the Bible. And there is one theme in particular that the Bible has to answer that dilemma, to address this issue. It's a theme that's buried deep, and yet it's hiding in plain sight. It's on every single page of the Bible, particularly starting on the first page, right through to the end. And it's the concept of Sabbath. Sabbath. So today I'm going to talk to you about Sabbath Economics. And what does that mean? So when I was young, growing up in church, I had a very little container of what I thought Sabbath meant. And essentially it just came down to I thought Sabbath was having a weekend. So as Christians we celebrate, I kind of was told we celebrate Sabbath on Sundays and we set aside Sundays to come to church to worship. And so in our family we tried not to book too much else in on a Sunday. That was kind of a day of rest set aside for God. And I was aware that actually kind of related to the Old Testament, the Jewish practice of Sabbath, which isn't on a Sunday, it starts on a Friday evening. So as the sun comes down on a Friday, that's when Sabbath starts, and it goes all the way through Saturday until the sun sets again. And in the modern world, I felt like we were pretty lucky because we get both. We get to have our Saturday off and our Sunday off. And I think everyone is probably really grateful that we get to have this weekly rhythm of a weekend. And that's kind of what I thought Sabbath was about. And a lot of sermons about Sabbath are about that. how important it is to actually stop striving, to stop working, to take time out. And the topic I've been given to talk about today is the subtraction bias. We've been talking about the ways that we deal with our money. And so I thought Sabbath would be perfect for that subtraction bias, that sometimes it actually leaves you better off to give stuff up, to do less, to give away, rather than adding all the time. I thought Sabbath fits in really nicely with that. And Sabbath as a weekend, that concept, there's truth in that. There's universal truth. It is good for humans to stop and to rest and to build that into a regular rhythm. This is universally true. This is deeply important for our emotional regulation and for human flourishing. But that container that's what Sabbath is all about, was very, very small, very limited, and I don't think really was tapping in at all to what the Bible's talking about when it speaks of Sabbath. And in fact, technically, as a Gentile Christian, I do not keep the Sabbath. And I cannot keep the Sabbath because Exodus 31 actually tells us pretty plainly, Sabbath is a sign given to the Jewish people, to the Israelite people, as a sign of God's eternal covenant with them. They are the ones called on to keep the Sabbath. If you and I want to keep the Sabbath, we actually have to fully convert to Judaism, and that means fulfilling all of the law of Moses, not just Sabbath, but that requires circumcision, so for all the boys in the room, that requires eating kosher, which is actually very inconvenient and difficult. That requires ritual purity, a whole heap of things. And Paul spent a lot of time actually showing the church and the new converts to Christianity that they did not have to convert to Judaism first. He actually went to great lengths to help us understand we're not required to keep the Sabbath. It's actually not for us. It's even problematic for us to talk about keeping the Sabbath as if that was something we were doing. So that kind of leaves me going, oh, well, what is it then? And why should I even care? If it's not even for me, what is this concept in the Bible? And when I think back to how I've seen the Sabbath, I even had some negative impressions of the Sabbath. Because when I looked at the Gospels, I associated Sabbath with the Pharisees. And I was taught that the Pharisees were the bad guys, and they were obsessed with keeping the law and all these ritual requirements. And Jesus kind of came in as this kind of punk rocker rebel who just went around breaking all of their sacred cows, and particularly he seemed to keep breaking the Sabbath on a regular basis. So I think in my head I associated Sabbath as being not just irrelevant for me, but even something that Jesus wasn't particularly into, and that had negative connotations of legalism. And so I'd kind of picked up some misunderstandings along the way. It turns out that Jesus was actually a Jew. He was a Torah-observant Jew who totally kept the Sabbath and ritual purity and all of the Mosaic law in a way that I didn't appreciate when I was younger, when I was looking at him. But I've learned a great deal in the last few years from Hebrew scholars and Jewish scholars, and it's helped me expand my category of Sabbath from just it's all about the weekend and taking some time out to a much, much bigger, much deeper concept. In fact, Jesus said he was the Lord of the Sabbath, and I don't think that means he's like the Lord of the long weekend and just likes to take a break. I think it's a much, much bigger concept than that. So today what I want to do is I want to try and do the quick version of this, because there is a 14-hour podcast series by Bible Project, if you're interested, on Seventh Day Rest, and I will post a link to that so that if you're nerdy like me and you want to listen deeper. But Sabbath is a meditation. It's a meditation, and the Hebrew scriptures are written in a way that we are supposed to meditate again and again. And there's meant to be layers and layers, and the more aspects, the more stories that bring up the same concept, the same language, the more we're supposed to add to that container of what that involves. And Sabbath goes right back to the very first page, to the very opening words. So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, we read the Bible in English, unfortunately. It was originally written in Hebrew, which I don't speak, and I don't know that anybody here is fluent in it. In Hebrew, guess how many words there are in that first line? 7, absolutely. And in the second line, there are 14. And for you maths nerds out there, the first line, not only are there 7 words, there's 28 letters, which, if you're observant, you'll realise is a multiple of 7. 7 is hidden in so many places in the Bible. You can start, next time you read the Bible and you read a list of things, just count how many things there are. Because quite often, ridiculously often, it's 7. 7 is hidden in so many places. It's almost as if the writers are going, hey, red flag here. This is important. 7 and the Sabbath is built into everything. And these opening verses are really important because they set the scene, the backdrop for all of the story. Not just the story of creation, but actually the story of our lives. Read this verse. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So right there, that's the backdrop of our lives. Formless and deep in Hebrew is tohu vavohu. Everyone say it with me. Tohu vavohu, which is a phrase that doesn't neatly translate into English. I'm going to oversimplify that, because I don't speak Hebrew well enough so I can get away with it, to chaos and death. So formless. I was always brought up as a Christian being told that the creation story explained the literal 7-day origins of the material earth, and that if I couldn't bend my head around that, then my faith wasn't strong enough. And I was also told that God spoke and something came out of nothing. But that's not actually what the verses are saying. It's saying it was formless and empty. There was chaos. It didn't have order. It wasn't put in its right place. And the deep, dark waters, the sea, the chaotic, tumultuous, cosmic sea was suppressing all life. So we've got darkness, we've got the sea, we've got chaos. And emptiness speaks of there is no life. Nothing can flourish in this environment. So I'm going to use the word death, even though that's not a neat translation of what it's trying to say. Because chaos and death is what I see when I turn the TV on and watch the news at the moment. When I look at the wars that are happening around the world, when I look at the chaos and death, and I feel overwhelmed and I do not know how to cope with it. Because in the midst of that chaos and death, God spoke, "Let there be light." And there was light. There was evening and there was morning the first day. And for 3 days, God spoke, and into that chaos, he brought order. He separated. He made space for people to breathe. He made dry land for people to walk on. So he dealt with the chaos. And now he needs to deal with the emptiness. And so for 3 days he speaks and brings life and fills the very spaces that he has just created. And so for 6 days he brings order and life where there was chaos and death. And he looks at it and says, "It is good." 6 times he says, "It is good." And when it's all complete, he looks and says, "It is very good." 7 times he speaks. And he speaks blessing and abundance into that space. And he ordains humans, male and female, in his image, to rule with him, to bring order and life to spaces of chaos and death. And then on the seventh day is different. Every other day is like a cycle. It goes, there was evening and there was morning the first day. But on the seventh day, there is no evening and morning. And from ancient times, people have noticed this is the day with no end. This is the day that is different from all the others. And it says he rested from all his work. He blessed the seventh day. He made it holy because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. And it's easy to think he rested because, oh gosh, he was so tired. That was a lot of work there. We all like to rest when. This is the language of a king establishing his kingdom and then coming to rest and rule in his temple. This is temple language. This is kingdom language. Now, if you have ever read the first few pages of the Bible, you'll know that there is not one creation story, but two. And it's kind of weird if you're trying to read it as a scientific document of how the world originated. You will do your head in trying to match those two stories together. And so a lot of scholars have gone, maybe they're different source material and for some reason they've both kind of been crammed in there. No, this is a very Hebrew design. Let's have two things parallel so you can meditate on it again from a different angle and that each story is going to deepen the other. So on page 2 of the Bible, we deepen the story of creation and particularly of the seventh day rest, the Sabbath. And so God creates a mountain garden and he puts humans in it, male and female. And from that garden space, a river flows out that separates into 4 headwaters and gives life and blessing to the whole earth. And so we have Eden as the second part of our creation story informing the first part. And I never would have understood what these two stories were really pointing to if I didn't listen to these excellent scholars who actually tell me this is not what I thought it was, the origins of the material universe. Because in the structure, in Hebrew writing, the centre of the text actually informs what the rest of it is about. It's the key to unravelling what's going on here. It's called chiastic structure. And these are just the first 2 pages of a document that we call the Torah, 5 books. And at the heart of the Torah is a whole long explanation of building a tent called the tabernacle that goes in the centre of the community where people come and worship God in ritual ways and find closeness to him. And knowing that that's at the centre and knowing that this is here at the beginning, there's a whole heap of clues in the text that actually map it exactly to the tabernacle. The seventh day is mapped to the tabernacle with the choice of language, with a whole heap of clues that if you want, I'll send you links if you want me to prove it and back it up. This is not me making this up. This is a lot of scholars talking about. This is tabernacle language. This is the seventh day becomes in time what the tabernacle is in space. It is a place of meeting with God. So all of a sudden, Sabbath is taking on different tones. And if you want to get really nerdy, in the first creation account, if you try and track exactly to the centre of it, well, what would the central day of 7 days be? What day? Day 4 is in the centre, and day 4 is where God puts the stars, moons, and sun to mark the sacred times, the days, and the years. And the sacred times, the Hebrew word is me'odim, which is the meeting, which is again linked to the tent of meeting. These are the times that we are meant to meet with God. So God is establishing this 7-day rhythm for us to come meet with him. It is sacred space. It is holy. It is blessed space. And so then It's given as one of the 10 Commandments to the people of God to keep the Sabbath, to honour it and keep it holy. But as well as that 7-day cycle, which already is a natural rhythm and a cycle to remember God, he also gives them 7 feasts, a cycle of 7 feasts in your year. And I never used to know about this, so I find it really interesting. It's 3 main times that the people are required to come to Jerusalem or come to the central space and celebrate these feasts together. So the first 3 are kind of all rolled into one. You have Passover that starts on the 14th day of the first month. Then you've got the festival of unleavened bread. So for 7 days, they only eat unleavened bread. And the third one happens within that week is the festival of first fruits. And for us as Christians, these dates should be really, really significant and important because the Passover is the one that Jesus identifies with. This is where he becomes the Passover lamb. And so there's a whole story in this for us. And the festival of the first fruits, that's when he rises again. So as Christians, we should be really excited about those festivals. That should be part of our understanding of who Jesus saw himself as. But for the Jewish people, this was the story of the Exodus. So they celebrated those festivals, and it's acting out the time that they were delivered from slavery and taken out of Egypt and into the wilderness and rescued from slavery. Then the clock starts ticking from the festival of first fruits. The clock starts ticking and you have to count off 7 lots of 7. 7, a week of weeks, 7 sevens. And that brings you to the middle of the festival season, which is called Shavuot, which we know as Pentecost. So 50 days later, 49 plus 1, 50 days later. So that's significant to us as well as Christians. But in the story of the Exodus, this is when they come to Mount Sinai. This is when God makes his covenant. He gives them the law. So they're still acting out, through these 7 festivals, they're acting out this process of coming out of slavery into the wilderness and towards the promised land. Which brings us to the 7th month. So on the first day of the 7th month, they all blow trumpets, Day of Trumpets. Then they do the Day of Atonement, which is about cleansing the temple and opening up a space to keep being in relationship with God. And then this last festival, does anybody know what the 7th festival is called? Does anyone? It's called the Feast of Tabernacles. And as a Christian, that's not something I've ever been aware of, but it actually sounds like the coolest one of all. Because for 7 days, you camp in your backyard, you create a little tent, and they're given instructions. They're told, take the choicest fruit and the branches of a beautiful tree from next to a river. Is this ringing any bells? Choicest fruit and branches of a beautiful tree located next to a river. Is that giving Eden vibes to anybody? 7 days, celebrate in your little tent. And remember both the tent that God made for people to meet with him, but also if you're tracking with this map of coming out of slavery, coming to Mount Sinai, getting the covenant promises, and then entering into the promised land. So every year, these 7 festivals are reliving this story of liberation, of freedom, of coming out of slavery through the wilderness into the promised land. But wait, there's more. If that's not opening the category up enough yet, every 7 years, God instructed the people to release the land from its bondage, as if the land was a slave to us, as if we were using the land and overusing our resources. And every 7 years, we were to leave the land and not farm at all and see what it produced. And he said, I'll give you an extra abundant harvest in the 6th year so that you can really just relax and let your animals have a break, let your workers have a break, let the land have a break. So he's really interested in our relationship with our resources and with our land as well. But then the super Sabbath, the most Sabbath of all Sabbaths, was every 7 times 7 years. He said, you're going to celebrate the year of Jubilee. And that is the year where all debts are cancelled. If you owe anybody anything, it's all cancelled. If you have sold your land to someone else to pay for just to live on subsistence wages or, to work for that person, you get to go back to your people, to your family of origin. You get to go back to your land. So it's a total, radical wealth redistribution, and it would happen often enough that it happens once in everyone's lifetime. It'd be the thing that you look forward to. And it's good news for the poor, and it's bad news for the rich, because the people who exploit and have used and taken advantage of the system have to give it all back. And this then becomes the model that they're supposed to follow. A model so radical that I think even Bernie Sanders would say, you're going too far. It's so radical, so countercultural, that the prophets started to use it as their symbol of hope for the world that is to come, for the great story that doesn't just affect the people of Israel, but the whole world that is groaning in this death and disorder and slavery, and that one day, the year of Jubilee would truly and fully come. And so when you start thinking about all of these things, these meditations that are built into Scripture, you see that Sabbath is a lot more than just having a weekend or taking some time out to be quiet. Even though that's wonderful, there are so many themes built in of justice, of liberation, of freedom, of our economic realities. And so I just want to say how grateful I am to be part of Westcity, where every year we try and live Sabbath by doing the common purse, by redistributing wealth, by working with our own local economics in a way that flows out and affects people around the world as well. And also, as I was preparing for my sermon, I reflected on how many people in our community that I know of personally who have given their lives to jobs that don't come with a high paycheck, jobs that are about Sabbath principles, people who work as chaplains and healthcare workers, who work in education, who give of their time. And then there are people with normal, regular jobs in our church who, because we need those too to keep everything flowing, who are generous financially, who help our church continue to go, who give generously outside of the church as well as within. And just how I see those Sabbath principles really happening in our community. But the best, of course, is when you get to the New Testament and what Jesus says when he first talks to the people and announces his ministry, his mission. And so on the next slide, we go to Luke chapter 4. And Jesus walks into the synagogue in the town of Nazareth, which is where he grew up. So, of course, nobody gets much respect in the place that they grew up, but he goes into the synagogue, and it's the tradition for one of the local people to read out the scriptures that day. So he opens the scroll of Isaiah and he reads this. The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour. And he's talking about the year of Jubilee here. This is what the prophets looked forward to and spoke about. And then the slam dunk moment, the mic drop moment, he sits down, everyone's staring at him, and he says, today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. Because Jesus didn't come to abolish the law and the prophets. He came to fulfill them. And everything that Sabbath was about was all pointing towards him and this ministry. And we get to be part of this eternal Sabbath that he has opened up. But we're also aware that we are in the now and the not yet. We are still living in a realm of chaos and death. And we have been appointed to be his partners and to live in Sabbath ways as if we already were in Eden, to have a spirit of generosity where we can let go of stuff, where we can share, where we can give, because it is all leading to a most beautiful picture. And out in the kids' church today, they're learning about the new heaven and the new earth, the new Jerusalem. And the Bible ends with this elaborate portrait of the garden as it's supposed to be, fully realised. This time it's a city with people from all over the earth streaming up to it. And it's got these beautiful phrases built into those chapters where it says, there will be no more sea, no more chaotic water suppressing all life. There will be no more night, no darkness. And we won't need the light of anything because the Lord himself is our light. There will be no curse. There will be no more death or grieving or crying or pain because the old order of things will have passed away. And that is a hope that feeds us when we're struggling in the midst of chaos and death and as we seek to live in Sabbath ways in our community. Amen and amen. So I'm going to invite the helpers to come back up. We're going to finish, as we always do, with our communion invite because... Oh yeah? Have we got any? And if the musos come back up. So we participate every week in the Lord's table because these are the symbols of Sabbath. These are the symbols actually particularly of the Passover meal, and these are the symbols that our Lord instituted as part of that festival of unleavened bread, and that we use to remind us of what is to be and what we are now. So this is the table, not of the church, but of the Lord. It is made ready for those who love God and for those who want to love God more. So come, you who have much faith and you who have little, you who have been here often and you who come for the first time, you who have tried to follow and you who have failed. Come, because it is the Lord who invites you. It is God's will that those who want Christ should meet him here. Come.
Thank you so much for joining us. Each week at Westcity, we say a benediction together. We do this because we believe that the purpose of the church is to be a caring community for the world, and that as we go and serve others, we enter into Christ's work of welcome, restoration and healing, both for us and others. We believe that in doing so, we get to see and encounter Christ. So let's say the benediction together. We come together as the church to be reminded of the go of Christ. So we will go out and feed the hungry, go out and clothe the naked, go out and fight for justice, go out and end oppression, go out and proclaim anew the old story, go out and associate with those who don't look like us, think like us, act like us, and don't even like us. And we'll do it all in the name of the one who sent us. His name is Jesus.